I stood in front of La Celeste, the most exclusive restaurant in downtown Boston, watching my reflection shimmer in the glass. 15 years ago, I scrubbed those windows as a teenager. Back then, I was just lived to everyone, quite unsure, a girl who was always left out of the group photos. Tonight, I wasn't here as a waitress. I wasn't here as the overlooked sister. I was here as the owner. They didn't know that yet. Inside, the lights glowed soft gold, and the sound of laughter spilled out like music written in a language I used to long to understand. It was Sabrina's birthday, my older sister. She'd always been the golden one, the one who got the big parties, the fancy internships, the endless support. And me, I was the one who took a different path, which is family code for we don't really talk about her. But that's the thing about taking a different path. It sometimes leads to places no one expects. I hadn't planned to say anything. I was going to sit quietly, smile politely, and make it through the night like I always did, until they put me at the kids' table. Again. And in that moment, something inside me clicked. Not with anger, but with clarity. They still didn't see me, but tonight they would. Because success isn't just about money or power or applause. It's about reclaiming your seat at the table, and sometimes it means building the table yourself. So before we begin, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated by the very people who were supposed to believe in you? If that's you, then stay with me. This isn't just a story about revenge, it's about quiet strength. About what happens when the girl they always looked past becomes the woman they can't ignore. Let me show you how it happened, step by step, word by word, scene by scene. The moment I stepped into the private dining room at La Celeste, it was like entering a well-rehearsed theater performance. Every laugh was measured, every compliment sharpened, like cutlery, and at the center of it all sat Sabrina, my older sister draped in red silk like a queen on her throne. Her husband Harrison nodded along distractedly as she held court basking in the admiration of our aunts, uncles, and old family friends who had known her since she was the gifted child, and I was the quiet one with potential. It was a gathering dressed in celebration, but stitched with invisible threads of hierarchy. There was no confusion about who belonged where. The main table was reserved for the accomplished doctors, lawyers, executives, and those who had followed the script our family wrote long ago. People who took the right jobs, married the right people, and carried the right last names. Everyone else plus one's younger cousins and apparently me were tucked into the periphery. That night it meant the far corner where the chairs were shorter, the light dimmer, and the centerpiece noticeably absent. I stared at the place card marked Olivia Delaney, nestled between two middle schoolers playing games on their phones. It wasn't just about seating, it never is. It was about signaling. You see, in families like mine, belonging comes with rules. You don't just earn a seat. You're granted one if and only if you follow the blueprint, go to the right college, choose a visible profession, attend every holiday without fail, and never ever surpass the golden child. I had unknowingly broken all of those rules, and in return, I was still being treated like I hadn't made it past 2008, when I dropped out of grad school and launched a business nobody understood. Back then, I thought if I just worked harder, proved myself silently, they'd see me. But success doesn't always speak the language of those who've already written your script. Sometimes, the more you grow, the more uncomfortable it makes the people who've kept you in a box. And so, as Sabrina lifted her glass and thanked everyone for coming, her voice warm and bright like a chandelier, I smiled politely from the shadows. She had no idea what was coming, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. Because the thing about unwritten rules is, they only hold power if you agree to play the game. And I was about to rewrite the rules completely. Let me take you back to where that decision began, not at this dinner table, but 10 years earlier in a kitchen that smelled like burnt garlic and broken pride. When we were kids, Sabrina always played the queen in our backyard games. I didn't mind back then. She was louder, taller, better at convincing the neighbor kids to join her imaginary kingdoms. I was the scribe or the cook or the tree fairy, any role that didn't require too much spotlight. I thought that's just who we were. But as we got older, the game never really ended. Sabrina just swapped the plastic tiara for a designer wardrobe and moved her kingdom indoors to birthday dinners, charity galas, and our parents' living room on Sunday afternoons. Our family adored her, not because she was kind, but because she was polished. She said the right things, wore the right brands, dated the right men. When she married Harrison, whose family owned a chain of boutique investment firms, it was like she'd reached some final level of approval. She became the blueprint, a living symbol of what success was supposed to look like. And I, with my startup meetings and quiet progress, became the contrast, the cautionary tale. She's still figuring it out, my mom would say kindly, as if I were lost in a maze instead of building the map. Belonging in our family was never about love. It was about performance, applause, visibility. You had to shine the way they understood shining. When I earned my first million, no one even called. But when Sabrina hosted a networking brunch with local politicians, she got a write-up in the community newsletter. I used to wonder if maybe I was just too different, too independent. But eventually I realized I wasn't broken. I just wasn't playing the same game. The rules were written in invisible ink: follow the traditional path, stay predictable, never challenge the hierarchy, and above all, never outgrow the roles they gave you. That night at the restaurant, as I took my seat next to a fidgety 11-year-old playing Minecraft, I thought about all the times I tried to shrink myself to fit at their table. I thought about the awards I'd never mentioned, the deals I signed alone, the nights I cried quietly after another holiday where my seat was next to the coat rack. And then I remembered the moment that changed everything, a Friday afternoon 10 years ago in the cramped office of a failing diner in Providence, Rhode Island. That was where I first realized I didn't need anyone's permission to rise. Let me take you there, because that's where my real story begins. The thing about microaggressions is that they rarely shout, they whisper. They slip between compliments and clinked glasses, dressed in good manners and polite smiles. At Sabrina's birthday dinner, they were plated right between the warm bread basket and the chilled Prosecco. I sat quietly, half listening to the conversation at the main table. I wasn't invited to speak, of course, but I heard everything. "Olivia's still doing that little thing with restaurants, right?" Aunt Margie asked, slicing her grilled salmon delicately. My mother nodded with the same restrained smile she wore when someone served overcooked beef. "Yes, she's experimenting with consulting. She's very independent." Independent, a word that in our family sounded suspiciously like unemployed. Someone made a soft joke about Olivia, the entrepreneur, not having a real job, and laughter followed like birds on cue. It wasn't cruel, not exactly, but it wasn't kind either. It was the kind of laughter people use to remind you of your place. I sipped my water, adjusted my posture, and pretended not to hear. That's how it always was. Sabrina could overspend, overtalk, and overshare and still be seen as confident and charming. I could land a six-figure consulting deal and be described as still figuring things out. There's a way some families write your identity in pen before you've even learned how to hold the page. It took me years to realize that this wasn't about what I did. It was about what they needed me to be: the backdrop, the contrast, the one who makes the stars shine brighter. But the truth is, there's nothing admirable about staying silent to make other people comfortable. So I stopped trying to be palatable. I stopped translating my success into something they could digest. That night, as Sabrina gushed about her foundation's new fundraiser, I sat back and thought of Providence, of garlic-scented air and a ledger filled with red ink, and how in that messy little diner I began to find my voice. Let me take you back to the first turnaround I ever attempted. Not just a business, but a belief in myself. It began with a failing restaurant and a decision no one else believed in but me. My fingers hovered over my phone beneath the tablecloth, the soft linen brushing against my wrist as if trying to remind me, "Are you sure I was?" With a quiet breath, I typed the message I had rehearsed for days. "Marco, it's time. Let's begin the welcome." Then I hit send. The hum of the room continued: undisturbed cutlery against china, clinking glasses, Sabrina's laughter curling through the air like perfume. No one noticed the shift. But I did. Marco had been with La Celeste since before it was La Celeste. He knew every inch of the restaurant, from the wine cellar to the VIP protocol list. He also knew, because I'd told him weeks ago, that this night might come. That if my family crossed a certain line, I wouldn't just take it, I'd turn the entire room into a mirror. Not out of spite, but because some silences need to be broken with silver trays and champagne flutes. As I waited, I thought back to Providence. 10 years ago, I walked into a failing diner on a rainy afternoon with barely enough savings to buy a broken-down espresso machine. Everyone said I was foolish. I was 24, underfunded, and completely alone. But I had one thing they didn't vision. I didn't see what it was. I saw what it could be. I negotiated the lease myself, redid the kitchen with a friend from culinary school, and turned that greasy spoon into a neighborhood gem. That was my first turnaround, the first proof that I could build something from the ground up. And I've been building ever since. Quietly, carefully, like laying bricks at night while the world sleeps, so one day you wake up to find yourself standing inside a fortress no one saw coming. This dinner, this table, this family, they were never going to invite me to belong, so I stopped waiting for permission. Because when you learn to invest in yourself, you stop needing others to believe first. And just then, I heard the sound that signaled everything was about to change, the soft, synchronized footsteps of the La Celeste server line approaching with champagne in hand. Let me tell you how the room reacted when the toast wasn't to Sabrina, but to someone they never saw coming. The room shifted before the words even landed. Marco stepped forward, elegant and composed, with the poise of someone who knew this moment mattered. Behind him, a procession of servers moved in perfect rhythm, each carrying crystal flutes and silver trays, as if they were about to crown royalty. Sabrina straightened in her seat, her eyes lighting up with the anticipation of a toast in her honor. I watched her smile widen, expecting the spotlight, as always. Marco's voice was calm, but it cut through the chatter like a bell in a quiet town square. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are honored tonight to celebrate not just a birthday, but the presence of someone very special. Our new owner who recently acquired La Celeste and the entire Delaney Hospitality Group. Please join me in welcoming Miss Olivia Delaney." The silence that followed wasn't just surprise, it was recalibration. You could feel it, like everyone in the room suddenly realized they'd been reading from the wrong script. Sabrina's glass paused midair. My mother's hand twitched toward her pearls, her signature tell. Even Harrison, who had barely looked at me all evening, now stared with his mouth slightly open. I stood slowly, not grandly, just steadily, and offered a small smile as I accepted the champagne Marco handed me. "Thank you, Marco," I said, my voice even. "La Celeste is one of our newest additions. We now manage 37 properties across the East Coast." It wasn't bragging, it was clarity. For the first time, I wasn't translating my accomplishments into something smaller, safer, or more digestible. I was speaking plainly, honestly, and the truth has a funny way of rearranging a room. Because success, even quiet, humble success, makes noise when it's finally heard. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that shifts attention. People started to whisper. Eyes darted around. I watched years of dismissiveness flicker into curiosity, discomfort, maybe even respect. And in that moment, standing there with a glass of $2,000 champagne they'd intended for someone else, I understood something clearly. Sometimes you don't need revenge. You just need reality to walk into the room first. But I wasn't done yet. Because there's a difference between being acknowledged and being respected. And the next few minutes would show them exactly what that difference looked like. The sound of silverware paused mid-motion is subtle but unmistakable. That soft clink against porcelain, half-finished bites, abandoned wine glasses held uncertainly in mid-air. It was the kind of stillness that only truth can bring. No one said anything right away. They didn't have to. The silence did the speaking. My mother blinked rapidly, her mouth slightly open, struggling to find the script. My father reached for his phone, a nervous tick he used whenever he felt out of depth. And Sabrina stared at me like she was seeing a stranger in her childhood home. I remembered the way they used to talk about me at family events. "She's doing something with food, I think she's consulting. Or maybe still traveling." Their tone was always sweet but laced with dismissal. I never corrected them. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't want to spend dinner defending a life they never asked about. That night, I realized something important. I had let them narrate my story for far too long. You can build empires in silence, but silence won't demand respect. Eventually, you have to speak. Not to prove your worth, but to protect it. I let them sit in that truth, let them feel what it was like to finally see me outside the frame they had drawn. Then I turned to Marco and said, "I believe Sabrina requested the vintage Dom Perignon, the one that runs $2,000 a bottle." Marco nodded fully, understanding the moment. "Put it on my tab." The gas from the table was almost musical. Sabrina's eyes widened. I knew what she was thinking, that it would be charged to her husband's company as usual. But not this time. Not tonight. That wasn't just champagne. That was the price of underestimation, and I was just getting started. Because it was time to revisit some family debts, ones they thought I had forgotten. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to. The weight of clarity has a way of doing the talking for you. Sabrina tried to recover. "Liv," she laughed lightly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. That was just a seating mix-up. "You know how chaotic planning can get with big parties." Her hand fluttered as if brushing away something insignificant. But it wasn't insignificant, it never had been. The kids' table, the years of being overlooked. The assumption that I'd stay quiet, stay grateful for crumbs. No worries, I replied calmly, meeting her gaze. But speaking of plans, there's been a change in how we handle reservations. Starting next month, La Celeste is introducing a members-only brunch system. All existing arrangements will need to be revalidated, including yours. Her expression froze. Sunday brunch was Sabrina's kingdom, her social playground. Hosting there gave her clout status, the illusion of control. And Harrison, I added, glancing at her husband. Your firm's corporate discount will now reflect our standard rate. No more legacy perks. He stiffened, eyes narrowing not in anger but calculation, because now the leverage was mine. For years, they had written the family story in one voice, Sabrina's. I had been a footnote, if that, but that night, I began rewriting the narrative, not in anger, but in authorship. Because if you don't write your own story, someone else will reduce it to a caption. And I was done being captioned. I turned toward the rest of the table, softening my tone. It's not about revenge, I said. It's about balance, about remembering that how we treat people when we think they're beneath us says more than any toast or title ever will. And in that moment, something shifted. Not just in the room, but in me. Because I realized it wasn't about proving I belonged. It was about realizing I never needed their permission to begin with. But I wasn't finished yet. There was still one conversation I needed to have, one that had been waiting in silence for years. And she was walking toward me now, lipstick freshly reapplied, eyes uncertain. My mother. She stood just behind my chair, smoothing the front of her blouse like she was brushing off invisible dust. That's how my mother prepared for delicate conversations, tidy on the outside, practiced on the inside. Olivia, dear. She began, her voice warm but trembling. Why don't we do lunch tomorrow, just the two of us? We haven't had a proper mother-daughter day in so long. I looked up at her, and for a moment I saw the woman who used to braid my hair before school, the one who packed handwritten notes in my lunchbox until I was 10. But those memories were shadowed by others of eye rolls when I brought up business ideas of quiet size whenever I didn't fit the mold. I can't, I said gently. I've got 3 board meetings and a flight to Miami to finalize our next acquisition. Her smile faltered. Miami, she repeated, as if geography might explain the distance between us. You never asked, Mom, I said softly. I've shared plenty. You just never listened. That's the thing about respect. It isn't something you earn once and keep forever. It's built in the quiet, consistent choices to see someone for who they are not, who you need them to be. I didn't say it to hurt her. I said it to be honest. Because honesty, even when it's hard, is one of the deepest forms of respect we can offer each other. Behind her, Tyler stood awkwardly, his gaze flicking between me and the empty chair he hadn't defended earlier. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence between us had lasted years. But this time, he took a breath and stepped forward. Liv, I should have spoken up sooner. About tonight, about everything. Yes, I nodded quietly, you should have. Because silence is a choice, and so is change. And as I looked at the cousins who once giggled behind napkins, now watching me with wide, curious eyes, I realized something. The cycle doesn't break when the loudest person apologizes. It breaks when the quiet ones decide not to carry it forward. And I had someone in mind to carry something better. A different kind of legacy. She was sitting just across the room, knees swinging, eyes bright, and 1,000 unspoken dreams in her heart. Emma. Emma sat 2 seats down from me at the so-called kids' table, her sparkly headband slipping just slightly to one side, her small hands folded neatly in her lap, like she was waiting to be called into something bigger. She hadn't said much during dinner, but after the reveal, her eyes hadn't left me. Not with confusion like the adults, but with wonder. Do you really own all of this? She whispered, leaning toward me. I smiled. All 37 restaurants, and a few more coming soon. Her mouth dropped open in silent awe. That's amazing. And just like that, I saw it, my younger self in her gaze. Curious, uninvited, observant in a room that rarely noticed. I reached into my purse, pulled out a tiny notepad, and scribbled something down. Next week, I said, handing it to her, you're coming with me to one of the kitchens. I'll show you how everything works, the back office, the prep line, even how we build menus. Her face lit up like it was Christmas. Because here's the truth, legacy isn't about what you hand down in dollars. It's about what you hand over in belief. Too many girls are taught to shrink to wait for permission. Emma didn't need to wait. She needed to be invited. Not to a seat at their table, but to help build a new one. One where curiosity is celebrated, not silenced. One where quiet strength isn't overlooked, but trained, mentored, and multiplied. And as her hand slipped into mine with the certainty only a child can carry, I knew the future wasn't in proving myself to people who had already decided who I was. It was in planting something new for her. But first, there was one last tradition I had to dismantle. A policy I was ready to rewrite, starting with the most symbolic seat in every restaurant I owned. The next morning, my office window framed the Boston skyline like a quiet promise. I sat with my coffee, no noise, no drama, just the soft hum of a new day, and read through the morning reports. Bookings were steady, Miami's deal had gone through, and then Sarah, my assistant, stepped in with a small stack of paper and a knowing look. "They've been calling all morning," she said gently, setting the messages down. "Your sister's husband, your mother, even your Uncle Henry." I didn't look at the stack. I didn't need to. "Shred them," I said, "and let's move forward with the new membership policy. No more special arrangements." Sarah smiled. She'd been with me since the Providence days, back when we painted our first restaurant wall ourselves at 2 a.m. because we couldn't afford contractors. She knew what this moment meant. "Oh," I added, "and one more thing." She paused. "Remove the kids' table from every layout plan, La Celeste, and every other property. No child, no guest, no less than label deserves to sit in the corner ever again. Because what we build when we build it from hurt, from grace, from quiet nights, no one claps for it deserves to stand for something. Not power, not revenge, but dignity. Legacy is the policy we create when no one's watching. It's in how we structure rooms not just to impress, but to include. That's the real success, building something that outlasts applause." And as I turned back to my desk, I picked up my phone and dialed one number. "Hi, Emma, it's your cousin Olivia. Ready to learn how to run a restaurant?" Because if I was ever going to rewrite the rules, I needed to make sure someone else would carry the pen. And she would, I believe that now. She wouldn't just inherit a seat. She'd help shape the whole table. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever sat in the corner of your own story waiting for someone to finally see you, let this be your reminder. You don't need their permission. You don't need their applause. You just need your vision, your voice, and the courage to build anyway. Because the tables they place us at don't define us. But the ones we build for others, those change everything. Now it's your turn. Have you ever been dismissed by your own family or quietly built something they never saw coming? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, sometimes the quiet ones aren't lost. They're just busy building something extraordinary. We'll see you in the next story.